There he is.
Hey, Mike. How are you?
Mr. Thomas, how are you?
Fine.
Great.
How are you? It's good to have you back on the show.
Nice to be back.
I have one of the most compelling storytellers in the U.S. today, Mike Rowe. He's an Emmy Award winning TV host, and he has a brand new film that's coming in theaters beginning June 27th. I got a chance to see it, and at first I was kind of curious, a little angry, and then a smile on my face, and then the patriot in me came out of nowhere. Mike, that takes a lot for that to happen for me. The movie's called Something to Stand For. Mike, how are you today?
I'm great, James. I'm flattered that you watched the movie, and I'm glad I took you on that emotional roller coaster.
you you did. I got to talk to the guys in the morning, man. I have coffee every morning at 5:30 a.m. religiously,
Oh,
5:30 a.m. with a couple of Republicans, Democrats,
hmm
and independents. And we go back and forth all the time. They need to see this movie. This is amazing. Tell me about, how did you get the stories? Again, never spoil, but just how did you get these stories? How did you dig deep?
Well, the movie didn't start as a movie. It actually started about 7 years ago as a podcast called The Way I Heard It, which was based on an old radio show you'll remember by the great Paul Harvey, who called The Rest of the Story. And Paul would tell, he wrote these 6 or 7 minute mysteries where you would learn something you didn't know about somebody you do, somebody famous. And I just always loved that model. So I adopted it for a podcast. I wrote a few hundred stories. They did really well. That turned into a book. Then it turned into a TV show. And about 3 months ago, this theater group, Fathom, they called me and they said, "Look, we love this kind of storytelling, and we think an Independence Day special using that format would really be interesting. What do you say?" And I thought about it for maybe a second and said, "Yeah, I would do that for sure." And we adopted 9 of them for the big screen. And then in between, I take a trip to DC and visit the statuary and some of the monuments and some of the memorials that have been built to honor the people featured in the movie. So it's a weird blend of things, which I imagine you would understand on the Morning Blend. And as far as your buddies go, the Democrats and the Republicans, tell them that I still believe that there's a chunk of people in this country who see themselves as Americans first. That's who the movie's for, and I didn't write it for liberals or conservatives. I mostly wrote it for myself because I wanted to explore the lives of some of these people a little deeper. And the fact that it turned into a movie, James, all I can tell you is, truth is stranger than fiction.
You got that right. Truth is very strange than fiction. Only one part of the movie made me cringe. The
Hmm.
emasculate. That was it. Other than that,
Oh,
I enjoyed the movie. But other than that,
well, look, I did dirty jobs for 20 years, James. There's no way I'm going to do a major motion picture and not at least take you to the business of castration just for a moment, because, because I know a lot of us feel that way today.
just like you just did, I was doing the same thing. I tell you, I love the way you told the stories without saying who the people were, because especially with the letter writer, Rebecca, the
Mm,
lieutenant,
hmm
I thought that was very interesting. And the two young men during the Revolutionary War, that was so,
Yeah.
wow. That's amazing. Talk a little bit about that. We're not going to say who they are, but talk a little bit about that. How'd that come about?
Well, I'll actually tell you who those are because in this case, you don't know their names. McComas and Wells. There were a couple of teenagers, and it was actually that battle. It looks a lot like the Revolution, but that was the War of 1812, and that moment in the movie happens right before the siege of Fort McHenry. But the reason I wanted to write a story about McComas and Wells is because I grew up in Baltimore. And on the way to work when I was a teenager, I would drive under this overpass. And the name of the overpass was McComas and Wells. And there were streets in town named for these people. And I always wondered who they were. Well, as it turns out, they were the teenagers who wouldn't stand for British troops in their city, burning their capital. And what they did was nothing short of terrorism if you were on the opposite side. But as a result of their refusal to stand for that which was unacceptable, we're a free country today. And that's a hell of a thing.
Yeah, speaking of a free country and a hell of a thing was the way you ended it with the bridge, Francis Scott Bridge, and how our country seems to be divided. So my question to you is, with all those interesting people that you talked about, famous people, what do you think they would say about America today?
Oh boy. I mean, that would be something, wouldn't it? To bring back Francis Scott Key, Jefferson, Lincoln, Washington, all of them, just sit them down and take them on a guided tour. I can't imagine what they would think. But I'll tell you this, you mentioned a divided country, and surely we are. I suspect we always have been to a degree. But one of the things that really struck me shooting this movie, everywhere I went in DC, the Lincoln Memorial was under construction. Arlington National Cemetery, under construction. The Jefferson Memorial, under construction. They're cleaning up graffiti right now as we speak on the Korean Memorial. Everything is under construction. And then at the end of the movie, there I was, standing on the ramparts of Fort McHenry, the site of my first field trip destination as a boy, looking across the Chesapeake at where the Francis Scott Key Bridge used to be, but is now on the bottom of the river being reconstructed. So I think our forefathers might, that's what I would show them, James. I would show them the fact that the country's not finished yet. We still have work to do. We still have progress to make. Bridges fall down, monuments get toppled. There are protests, there's unrest, there's drama. There always has been, there always will be, but my God, look at the progress we've made. Look how far we've come. And hopefully we'd all be able to cheers with a drink of ale, since the Star Spangled Banner, first and foremost, was a drinking song.
I like that. Been speaking with Mike Rowe. You got to see this movie, Something to Stand For, begins June 27th, all the way through the July 4th, and maybe hopefully beyond. Mike, thank you for joining us on Morning Blend again. Don't do that to me again. Leave the emasculator out, okay?
Something to Stand For movie. Watch the trailer. It's going to make you want to go see this thing, except for the part James is talking about. Spoiler alert, there is some castration. Just saying, but it's family friendly.
Just saying. Thanks again, Mike.
Adios, my friend.
Adios.